We're going to discuss about the population decline and the new demographic trends around the world. Is it a challenge, a threat, or a new beginning for all of us? Thank you very much, Professor Ian, for being with us. I'm going to start with the big pictures. How do you see the new demographic trends?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation from the World Government Summit. We're going through a period of tremendously rapid demographic transition. When I was a student, the big fear was what people called the population bomb, overpopulation. Fears that the big challenge of the future would be too many people. Now, in most of the world, the concern is too few people, in fact, too few young people, and many more elderly people. I see this as a great sign of success. It's a success of the woman's right to choose, women able to determine how many children they have, the availability of contraception, education, and the ability for people to make their decisions independently. So it's success culturally, it has tremendous economic benefits, and it's also very variable. Everywhere in the world, there's not a single country in the world where birth rates are going up. The question is, how quickly are they coming down? In Africa, sub-Saharan Africa particularly, but also Maghreb, still very high. But well over half the countries in the world now, including well over half of developing countries, are below replacement level, which is about 2.1 children on average per adult female. And the reason it's not 2 is because not all children grow to be adults, some die, and also there's more boys being born than girls, which creates another sort of challenge for the future. But essentially, this is dramatic. And some regions, including the UAE, we've seen this transition rapid. You know, in the 1960s, the average mother in the UAE had 7 children. Today, the average is 1.2, okay? This is the decline over this period of time. So very rapid demographic transition. Of course, UAE is not exceptional. It's part of a global trend, and this has very big economic implications. It has big implications for growth and competitiveness, for political power.
Of course, we're going to discuss them, but let me stick with the factors. You mentioned the women's rights and the awareness, and is that all? So why we reach this situation now? What are the essential factors for it?
It's not only that women have the right to choose, that's important. It's also that the economic conditions of societies have changed dramatically. In societies which are basically rural, poor, having more children means more children to look after the cattle, the goats, to help you with the harvest. Children are an asset. They're labor force. When you get richer and you be urbanized, children are mainly a cost. You have to pay for their education, you pay for their health, you pay for their space, and they don't generate income for you. It's also the case that children leave home and no longer look after their parents as much. So increasingly, children are not seen as a help to the labor market for the family, but as a cost, and that cost is increasing dramatically. The cost of living in urban areas, the cost of apartment, of rooms, the cost of education, of health is growing up very rapidly. So people are often unable to afford to have children now. They're too poor to have children, or they don't see children as an asset, and they would rather have fewer children and invest more in them, invest in their health, invest in their education, and that turns out to be a wise decision, because people with fewer children tend to be wealthier, and their children tend to be wealthier and more educated. So it's a rational decision as the economics and as the geography, the urbanization of people changes.
So you see it as a positive thing, but we've seen like many governments and countries trying to rise this level. How come, and what are the implications, especially in economy, in the workforce, also on the retirement plans and systems? So this is a big load somehow.
Yeah. I mean, governments have tried to influence birth rates for a long time. You know, the biggest example, of course, is the China one-child policy, which was dramatic. Interestingly enough, China's trying to encourage more birth now. It dropped its one-child policy over 10 years ago. And many countries, European countries, countries in this region, are trying to encourage higher fertility, more births. These policies tend to be very ineffective, very costly, very ineffective. It's not that society's cultures changed. You know, a country like Iran had, or the UAE, is not that different culturally now to what it was in the 1970s. It's just that people are thinking differently, the economy is different, and you cannot reverse that. You cannot suddenly convince people to have more children because the fundamentals are there. The benefits are much more education in people, much less population pressure. Of course, it's good ecologically as well, less population pressure. The costs are that the taxpayers, the workers, have more and more dependence. It's not just that fertility, that birth rates are going down, age is increasing dramatically as well. That's also very, very positive. We are leading longer, healthier lives. Here in this region, it's over 80 now, average life expectancy. This has gone up by over 20 years over this period where birth rates have gone down. This is good news. But it means that the issue of pensions, the issues of elderly care, the issues of when do people retire, do they retire healthy, what do they do, how are they sustained in their old age is big. And the average number of dependents that workers are supporting is going up dramatically. So I believe we will be heading to a world where retirement ages as we know them are no longer feasible. It doesn't make sense to have retirement ages which in Europe are going down when they should be going up. You see President Macron has tried to fight this battle unsuccessfully. So we need to rethink older people in the workforce being more productive. That will happen. We need to rethink how technology can help do the work that young people did. Japan has always shown us the way with this. Japan has always been at the frontier of technological change because it was at the frontier of demographic change. And people were being substituted by machines for a long time, since the 1970s in Japan. Technology will go a long way, and migration is also very important. The UAE understands that. 90% of the workforce here is migrant.
But this is not the case around the world, especially the countries the most affected, but the decline in rising
not yet.
decline birth.
Not yet. I mean, we see rising anti-migrant sentiment in Europe, in North America, for example, as birth rates go down and population ages. But I believe this will change. Looking after old people requires tough work, which most nationals do not want to do in many countries, and it cannot be done remotely. It has to be done in place. And so that will require more migrant workers, I believe, and I think societies will change their views about migration. Even Japan, we see now, is beginning to change its view. Korea is beginning to change its views. These were very anti-migrant societies, but there's a long lag between the demographic change and the societal attitudes.
And the aging population, of course, but however, at the same time, it doesn't create this fear of or for the identity, the future of the society itself and the combination of this society.
I think there are concerns, and we see it in the politics around migration. There are concerns about cultural identity, there are concerns about the number of migrants. I think the UAE is a great model of a place that's able to absorb very high shares of migrants without diluting its cultural identity. It's been a great asset. It's the reason why this region is so successful. because it's been able to do this so successfully. But it is the case that people feel that migrants are a threat. I think this is more to do with other issues, the lack of affordability of housing in urban areas, the pressures on public transport, the pressures on public transport and housing and health are making people feel that somehow it's us and them, that the migrants are taking their resources rather than contributing to their growth and their success. And I think those issues have to be addressed. In other words, we need to understand, why are people so concerned about migrants? It's partly cultural identity, but I think it's mainly economics. They are worried about jobs, they're worried about affordability of resources, and that needs to be addressed. It's also the case that the new jobs of the future are in different places to the old jobs. So the dynamism is in dynamic cities. And a lot of people who are most threatened by migrants are in other places, left behind places. We see around the world that the most successful cities, Dubai, Vancouver, Toronto, Melbourne, London, have the highest share of migrants. Because migrants are the entrepreneurs, the investors contributing to the economy. But those aren't the places voting against migrants. The places voting against migrants are the rural areas, the left behind areas, and the others, where people feel threatened.
And you mentioned also that some policies or what governments tried to raise the childbirth are ineffective. Why is that? All of them in the whole world, and what to expect, how to deal with this issue?
I don't think that governments can change fertility in any meaningful way. You know, they can shift it a decimal point, which you can do at great expense. But the trends, the secular trend is, I think, really irreversible. And you can stabilize it at low levels. I think it's to do with the fact that basically young people, particularly young women, are making choices about their lives. And you can't only change. One way you can improve fertility and birth rates, of course, is to allow more migrants into your societies. Because migrants, and if you allow them to settle with their families, they have much higher birth rates than the native people. So that's one way of doing it, but that's not a way that Europe or North America will embrace. It also is only a short-term solution, because by the second generation, the migrants have the same birth rates as local people. They revert to the mean. So it's not a long-term solution. You can do many things. You know, in France, they spend almost €1 million per child trying to increase fertility rates. Nursery school places, childcare places, all sorts of fiscal incentives. It doesn't work. Or it doesn't work for the people the government wants it to work for. And I think that's the case around the world. So we need to embrace this future. We need to see the positives in it, to manage the downside, but to try and get governments to lift fertility again, I think, is pushing against the tide.
So what are the positives? How can we see it as a new beginning?
I think the positives are that we worried a lot about overpopulation. We know we have a resource crisis, we have a climate crisis. By the end of this century, the world's population will be much smaller than it is today. People will live longer, healthier lives. You don't have to worry about the issues that worry me, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. For the next 20 years, we're going to have a rapid growth in elderly people with a rapid growth in neurodegenerative mental disease. But then those will be resolved too. And we will lead longer, healthier lives where people are fit and able into their hundreds. and societies will work hard to keep them fit and able, and they will want to contribute. So it's a positive because we will be longer and fitter, but smaller families, more investment in fewer people, higher levels of education, higher levels of growth, and technology doing many of the things that are very difficult and problematic. Repetitive, dirty, hard jobs will be done with a great lot of robotics and automation. So I see a more positive future, but we have to invest in it. We have to embrace it. We have to see the opportunities that come from lower birth rates and longer aging.
Technology is here already, and we're dealing with it somehow.
Sorry?
Automation and new technologies and AI are there already here, so it's not
and it's work.
But how this will affect, especially for elder people and the rising amount of older population, the human interactions?
Well, I think we will, as we become wealthier, as we have more options, as we have more technology to assist us, we release ourselves from many things machines can do, which is repetitive, rules-based jobs that don't require much creativity. So we can become more creative. We could all be wonderful musicians and do things that machines can't do. We can use our time to be creative, leaving repetitive jobs to machines.
The problem is that ChatGPT and DeepSeek are now doing creative things
instead
of us.
Yes, they are, and they're getting better by the second. But what I see with my students at Oxford is that they're getting better too, using this. You take it as a given. It's a platform you can use, and it doesn't limit you. It's not a barrier that you hold you back. It allows you to express yourself in ways. A lot of parents say to me, what should my children study for the future? What is going to make us successful? And the answer that I have is it really doesn't matter as long as they want to be curious and embrace it, as long as they want to learn. Because everything we learn is going to get out of date pretty quickly. But you need to keep learning and keep doing. And with the technology pushing us, we'll learn faster. So I'm optimistic. The big hope, of course, is we don't only learn to do, TikTok, but we learn to solve the world's problems, climate change, conflicts, and others. That's the question. Do we use this for self-indulgent leisure, or do we use it collectively to solve the world's problems?
So what are your recommendations for policymakers and also societies to embrace the positive sides of these new trends, demographic trends, and also how to face the challenges coming with it?
I mean, my recommendation is not to try and change fertility rates. You've heard me on that. I think we need to understand where it's coming from, why it's coming, and embrace it. I think we need to focus in the near term on the impact of a lot of older people who are not that able, and address those issues of neurodegeneration. We need to keep people fit much longer, so walking, physical activity, intellectual activity for society, that's extremely important with aging societies. We need to make young people more productive because they're going to be supporting more and more old people. So invest in them, help them generate the ideas, make them more productive and fulfilled. We need to embrace migration. We need to learn from the UAE around the world because we're going to need migrants to do many, many jobs in the future. And if we're not prepared to have them, our productivity will go down and the care for the elderly will be much more expensive and much more difficult. So there are many things.
Will there be enough migrants if this trend is all over the continents, all over the world?
Yes, there'll be enough migrants because for a number of reasons. One is because fertility is coming down at very different rates in different places. So, there's 100 million people coming into the workforce over the next 10 years in Africa, and the jobs are not going to be there. So there's certainly enough people. There's going to be people coming out of other parts of the world. So there's enough migrants. But the question is, are we prepared to treat them decently? Are we prepared to accept them into our societies, to make them productive? And again, there's a huge amount to learn from the UAE in that respect. So I think it requires governments to see demographics as central and to act accordingly.
Professor Ian Goldin, Professor of Development and Globalization in Oxford University. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
And thank you for you.